one of those things where you could come and say,
If it's all right with you, we're going to get going.
Yeah.
All right. We'd like to open the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for April 7th, 2021. Roll call.
Andrew Budke.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Kuhn.
Here.
Matichek.
Here.
Reichert.
Here.
Sandy. Here. Wasvik.
Here.
Lunsky.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Just on a personal note, I'd like to say welcome back, everyone. It's great to see faces and be a team again. Not that we weren't over the Zoom, but it's a little easier. And the second thing I'm going to just say real quickly before we really start the meeting, I don't know how many of you saw it, but Paula, our past president and member of this committee for many, many years, we looked at it, 10 years she was actually the president of this, and I follow a big feat in that job. And she passed away on the 30th of March. So just our condolences, and keep her and her family in your thoughts and prayers, and what a wonderful person. We all love to go have a beer with her after this. So with that, we will get going. Reading and approval of the minutes from the March 3rd, 2021 meeting. Mr. Reichert.
Move approval. Second.
Moved by Mr. Reichert, second by Mr. Lunsky. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Meetings are approved and submitted as submitted. Item 3.1.
3-1 ordinance to amend zoning map to include Memorial Village PUD Lot 2, Block 1, Memorial Stadium re-subdivision located at 2625 2nd Avenue North.
Miss Edwards.
Sounds good. Hopefully this picks everything up. We'll get started. You saw these preliminary. I'll talk about the first three. We're talking UND Memorial Stadium, the Wilkerson project, and the Princeton Avenue project. You saw these for preliminary last month. Nothing really has changed in terms of significant modifications to the PUDs from preliminary to final. However, today we do have Mr. Mike Pieper with UND Facilities here to give you a background of the projects. So with that, I can have him kind of come up and give you a run through and go from there and answer any questions you may have after that, if that's okay.
Please do.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to be brief and just answer questions if you have them, but Memorial Village developers are redeveloping the site that used to be the Memorial Stadium. It's a project that's been in movement for a while. There was some conversations and approvals around some tax incentives, but the first floor will be a condo owned by the foundation. That space will be occupied by UND Athletics. The upper floors will be market rate private apartments on behalf of the developers. And so it's just changing the use of that site. I think that site for the most part has been zoned UND, and it's been exclusive to UND Athletics. So the main floor continues to be UND Athletics. It's just the upper floors will be available for private apartments.
Do you want to walk through Wilkerson and Princeton too?
I guess.
Yes, I can.
What's that?
I was going to have him walk through the other three, if that's okay.
That's fine. Yep, we'll take care of them all at once.
There's one question there. Or?
Mr. Matichek, I'm sorry.
Yes, this actually isn't a question for you, it's more for Ryan or Andrea. The UD, I noticed on the second page here, all of their requirements are somewhat different than the cities. So is that their call then? Like instead of impervious surfaces at 85% maximum, they're at 55%. So that's just code for their stuff, right?
Correct.
Different from the cities.
The reason we're going through with
Okay.
the PUDs is because we're differing from the UD 55%. This particular facility would like to see 85, which is common for mixed-use development in other areas of town, so we felt it was appropriate. But yes, that would be the difference of why we're going through the PUD change, because things in the UD district needed to be amended to allow for the development.
And it's to their advantage to have a PUD here.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to point out too, specifically on that impervious lot coverage, that
that lot is very small. That,
Yeah.
And like Mike said, that UND Alumni Association is going to be on that, but keep in mind that there's a lot of green space around this. Some of it's turf, some down by the railroad tracks is still going to be open space for.
So how close will it actually be to Columbia Road? 35 feet?
More than that. It's just about 50, I think.
50?
A little
Okay.
over 50.
Will that be green?
There's going to be parking within that.
Okay.
Yeah. It's going to look very urban in that area. I'm just, the whole complex has a lot of stuff going on that's very much centered, like Mike said, on UND athletics, but this is kind of the way that they're making this whole project work in terms of getting the UND athletic new offices and then bringing new market rate rent apartments there as well.
I don't know that the green space is going to change terribly from what's out there existing. And so I think that, and they will still be required to follow stormwater requirements with that as well.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Bucky.
Last time we talked about, there was on the plat, there's like a sewer line and easement sort of in the southwest corner. I guess my question on that is, was the city planning to move that line prior to this project, or is it being moved because of the project?
It is being requested to be moved because of the project. It is in the works to move it. Because it's an active line, we can't vacate that until we've actually moved it and rerouted it. And so that vacation will come through as a separate item once that line is able to be truly discontinued.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm not an engineer, but I know a little bit about the dial. The section that they're looking at replacing is concrete, which has some erosion issues, so it was decided to just replace that section versus work around it, because it would have to be replaced at some point anyways.
Okay.
Wilkerson and University Avenue. So this probably came about mostly because of, initially setback. We've tried to push the buildings a little bit closer to the road with the new Union and Nistler Hall on the south side of University. With the Wilkerson complex, there's 5 buildings currently on that site. We're looking at remodeling the 3 on the north end of that border and replacing 2. One will be fronting University, one will be fronting Stanford, and just looking to kind of push those buildings a little closer to the road. Those buildings in the past have been interconnected through an underground tunnel system to get the students to Wilkerson. What we know about our traditional freshman students that are mandatory to live on campus, they prefer to live in the Wilkerson complex because they're connected to the Wilkerson Food Commons. They don't have to walk outside for breakfast, lunch, dinner on the weekends. So what we're doing is we're getting all the freshmen, enough density on that site to get all the freshmen around Wilkerson. And we're making the connections now above ground, so it'll open up a lot more green space in between the buildings for some recreational type space. So pushing it a little bit closer to University helps preserve that green space for student recreation in between the buildings. I think the third one, you want me to touch base on the
If you don't
square?
have any questions, sure.
Yeah, everybody good on that one? I think, yeah, just keep moving forward. And we'll just come back and we'll open public hearings and we'll break up everything separately.
Sure, so
but no.
on the east side of the coulee, I kind of classify that as the Squires complex. There's a number of older resident halls on that site. Those resident halls are what they call double-loaded hallways, where it's the old traditional one-room, double-bunked, common bathrooms. Those are very hard to lease out to students of any kind. So the one nice thing back on the Wilkerson is those were originally built as suite style, which is still the demand by students. So what we'd like to do is, because we have the density to serve the resident hall students around the Wilkerson, is to take those buildings down and open it up for redevelopment. The development that we were looking at would have been associated with student housing, hall directors, RAs, but it would be more apartment style. And so again, trying to get that more urban frontage onto University, it does open up some space as you go to the north. That also allows to get adequate parking on the site for the tenants of that building, which would be desirable by future tenants. So that was the concept behind there. We've been trying to, with our planning, we have an existing PUD up on the Bronson side around the REA. We have an existing PUD over by the Hilton. We'd like to preserve the option at some point in time to have some commercial development on the first floors of those buildings. I can say at this time, the design on that building would be very traditional student housing with no commercial space, but that project is still in planning.
Okay, sounds good, thank you very much. We will call you back, we got some questions, I guess, at this point. So we'll come back to item 3.1, that's the Memorial Village, right? I'll open up the public hearing. Anybody in the audience like to step up and address item 3.1, do so at this time. I don't see anybody, so we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission. Any thoughts? Mr. Kuhn? Second by Ms. Sandy. Discussion? None. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, item 3.1 is done. 3.2.
3-2, ordinance to amend zoning map to include UND Wilkerson, P3 housing, PUD, unplatted parts, Grand Forks Township, 3500 block of University Avenue.
Ms. Edwardson, same deal, I'm assuming.
Correct.
I'll open up the public hearing. Anybody in the audience would like to step up and address 3.2, do so at this time. Seeing no one, bring it back to the commission. Mr. Reichert.
Move approval.
Moved by Mr. Reichert. Second by Mr. Budke. Sorry, Mr. Kuhn, I saw his hand. Any discussion? Seeing none, call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Item 3.2 passes. 3.3.
3-3, ordinance to amend zoning map to include UND Princeton, P3 housing, PUD, unplatted parts, Grand Forks Township, 400 block of Princeton Street.
Ms. Edwardson.
This would be the same, just asking for final approval.
Okay. Public hearing. Anybody in the audience like to step up and address item 3.3, do so at this time. I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission. Mr. Reichert?
Move approval.
Second by Ms. Sandy. Discussion? I don't see any. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, item 3.3 passes. 3.4.
3-4, ordinance to amend zoning map to include Christus Rex PUD, Lot 2 and 3, Block 11, University Place Edition, located at 3024, 3012 University Avenue.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. So I'll zoom in real quick. This is one that we did have last time. We sent out the notification around. Here's Harvard Street, here's University. This is for the Archives coffee shop. It started as an accessory use onto Christus Rex, which is, churches are allowed within that zoning district. It's fair to say that Archives has been very successful. It's a grown business now, and we've had it under our UD district, and technically it's enough now that it's fair to say that it should be in a commercial district. So we've looked at putting this in a PUD and making it an allowable use as a standalone within that. It still is connected to Christus Rex, but in this case we wanted to make it a allowable use. The owner of Archives, who is here tonight, his future intention, he's let us know as well, is to get a beer and wine license. That is through city council, but he has made us aware of that as well. So I do want to be upfront about that, but at the same token, despite what your thoughts are on that, we do want to make this allowable zoning, so the coffee shop is an allowable use. So with that, I can certainly entertain any other questions, but the owner is here as well, and he can probably answer some other questions that you may have as well.
So anything for Mr. Brooks before we open up a public hearing? Mr. Reichert?
Ryan, so how should I be thinking about this? I mean, we've got somebody that has a non-conforming use, and now we're sort of approving that. Something I think we should be very, 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 very careful not to do. Why should we think of this one differently?
Well, it was kind of, like I said, it started as an accessory use under the church, which is allowed. I don't know if I want to punish them for their success in this case, but I also don't think it's out of place here. Just like the university had kind of talked about potentially having mixed use on the bottom floor. In this area along University, this makes sense. The coffee shop, the parking they're right behind a very large parking lot on the backside. People aren't required to come in, I think majority, I would guess probably 90+% of the folks that are there are already on campus. They park either in their own home and walk over, or they work somewhere on campus. So in this case, probably our UD district could potentially be looked at, but I want to be careful with that because I don't want to have UD districts. There's a lot of areas where I wouldn't want to open that up where it would work everywhere. So that's kind of where I would be cautious, but that's where those PUDs make sense, which is why we do the micro PUDs that we do.
I mean, I own 4 properties right in this area.
Mm-hmm.
Can I start putting in a restaurant, sporting goods store, a bar, and say, well, they're successful, so you should change the zoning?
No, but I will tell you that, in terms of a coffee shop being attached to a church, the way that this started is an allowable thing. I mean, that's
right. And it's the creep. It's then when they decide to sell this 10 years from now, and somebody isn't bringing in a church-affiliated, coffee shop / maybe a couple of glasses of wine.
Yep.
Harry Bushaw, God rest his soul, once put the Bun Lounge right across the street from the Union, or somebody wants to put a Target store right in the middle of campus.
I think we always have to evaluate those, each one, and we have many discussions on this in the office, and, Andrea and I will always say and Stephanie, parking, where are we at with parking? And we have some in the office that say, hey, you know what, maybe we spend too much time looking at parking as well. So I see both sides. The red pepper is one that often gets used. There is not anybody in town that's going to tell you the pepper doesn't work on University Avenue, but I don't know if that would work everywhere along University Avenue as well. So there's always a cautionary tale with that. But if the city were to come in and say, you know what, red pepper doesn't work anymore, let's shut that down, I don't think anybody would be supportive of that. So I think we always have to take a look at those. We always want to take a look at an individual site, see if it makes sense. What is the parking like? How does that mix with the neighborhood? And in some cases, I think we take a look at archives here and say, you know what, this does make sense. I think a university in and of itself, they're changing, they're evolving. And that's why even like on those previous ones that we approved, we're saying mixed use makes sense on those as well. Universities all over are kind of getting into, where it makes sense to kind of have a draw. We want the university students to interact with outside campus, but in some cases it makes sense to make these amenities available to them closer to where they're at. So that's why we think it makes sense in this case.
Now with a PUD, we could limit the uses on this property to just about anything we wanted, right?
That's correct. The PUD does give you that flexibility, absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
So if your red pepper decided to serve beer and wine, how would the consensus be? If you're going to use that's my struggle also.
That's where we definitely take a look at, what the distance is to residential, and how that makes sense.
Well,
or does it?
I don't think there's distance to residential. I think you're in a center of a dry campus. In a state with the highest binge drinking use in the nation, let's be clear. Slapping a beer place right across the street from the Union might not be the best idea.
Miss Sandy?
I like it.
Which part, Miss
I like
Sandy?
all of it.
The
I
beer
actually do. I like every part of this. I think it's awesome that he opened this coffee house and that it's doing well. And with a couple kids who are sophomores in high school and going to start looking at colleges, I think it's important that we have these opportunities on campus. I think it will help draw kids to want to live on campus, maybe not bring cars to campus if there's enough of this. So I'm hoping that we actually get more of this. And of course, we're not talking about the beer and wine, but if we were talking about the beer and wine, I would prefer, if it were my kids living around there, that they go somewhere somewhere to drink where there's someone watching how much they're being served, than hiding in the dorm room drinking. Because if the kids are going to drink, they're going to drink. So I wouldn't have any objection to that either if anyone ever asked my opinion. I often give my opinion before being asked.
I saw Mr. Kuhn.
Just a quick comment. About 3 weeks ago, I was in a meeting with President Armcost, and he brought up this particular, request. They're well aware of that it might include beer and wine, but he said they have absolutely no objections to it, basically along that same line. They'd rather than having the students driving to go out and drink and driving home afterwards, if it's right there and they want a drink or two, they can have it. And so the university is aware of it and has no objections to it.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Kuhn. Mr. Budke?
So just to clarify, because I think I agree with you, Ms. Sandy, what we're talking about here, we're talking about the two lots, right? Essentially one property is part of the micro PUD, and we're talking about university district uses and coffee restaurant uses, and that's it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we're not specifically listing in the beer and wine.
Right.
Because city council will ultimately make that decision, but he wanted to be upfront as well. He didn't want to make it look like it was fast one being pulled over anybody when he requests that later on. So that's the reason that's included.
that.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Move approval?
Well, I gotta open up. I let us go for a while. I will. At this time, I'll open the public hearing. Anybody in the audience would like to step up and address item 3.4, do so at this time, please. Not seeing anybody at this time. That'll bring it back to the commission. Mr. Lunsky.
I move approval.
Second by Mr. Matacek. Any further discussions? We're gonna lose this one. Any further discussions? None. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. Motion carries. 3.5.
3-5, excuse me, 3-5, ordinance to amend the Chapter 18 Land Development Code, B3, General Business District Zone to allow large animal clinics as a conditional use.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. So we had quite a bit of discussion on this last time, and I think we went back and forth. So our recommendation, as it sits, and this is a text amendment, we're now allowing, or we would propose to allow large animal clinics in our B3, which is our general business district, and our proposal is to allow it only through a conditional use permit. So what that means is, after this, if this were to be approved, somebody would need to make a application to the City of Grand Forks Planning Department, and it would be on a specific site. We would ask for a site plan. We would ask for how the site would be accessed, what they're, how they're going to come in and out of a site. We'd be notifying neighbors around 400 feet around the property, and then we'd have a public hearing here in front of you where we would be allowing individuals to come in. You can make special requirements on that, if the access doesn't look correct, or in some cases, if it was happened to be a B3 right next to, say, a single-family home, maybe that doesn't make sense for a large animal clinic. So that's the reason why we put it into a conditional use as as opposed to a permitted use within a B3. Some of the things that we added from last time, Dawson, our intern, he took a look at some of the other big cities around, took a look at Bismarck, Minot, Jamestown, what some of those look like, where they're at within their city. So he took the Google map shot. I know some of the thought was, hey, those should be outside, which ironically they are permitted within our A1, A2 areas as well. But in this case, we took a look at where they were allowed, and they're usually within their city. But again, we'd want to have some sort of evaluation. Does it make sense in that location? What it's going to look like, those types of things. So in this case, we think that we're going to have probably requests along Gateway Drive. There is, this one doesn't, it's not an application right now, but there is somebody who was interested, and we think their particular site will work, and they do happen to be zoned as a B3. So with that, I've done a lot of talking. This one is a text amendment, which is a little unusual. We don't have too many of those, but we're happy to answer any questions that you may have as well.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Brooks from the commission before I open the public hearing? I don't see a lot of hands. I'll open the public hearing. Anybody in the audience like to step up and address item 3.5, do so at this time. Seeing none, bring it back to the commission. Mr. Budke?
Yeah, I think that this makes a lot of sense as a conditional use, so I'll move approval.
Second by Mr. Matichek. Any further discussion? Seeing, Mr. Johnson?
Just what, excuse me, just one thing is, I guess this would be on the conditional use permit. I would like to see like no outdoor activity of corrals, like animals housed continuously inside the facility. I don't know if in the conditional use, so just so we don't have big corrals going in or horses being brought in and just outside the whole day.
Yep. Now, you guys that would be part of the conditional use where you guys would say that's not, when they show an area like that, that's just not permitted. And then we can let people know that this is the feedback that we heard, so.
That should go on the record.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I'll just go on record saying that I told Ryan in our pre-meeting that I didn't want to be anything like Minot or Jamestown. 3.6, sorry.
3-6, sign appeal for Ironhide located at 3900 South 42nd Street to allow for larger ground monument signage.
Mr. Brooks.
Okay, so we got a sign appeal here. As you guys know, Ironhide's been before you a few times with plats and those types of things. But here they're located out on South 42nd Street, just south of Revolution. Site's up and looks very good out there. And they're located on South 42nd Street, which actually shares some right-of-way there with I-29. In the past, we had Butler, which was located in Industrial Park. They wanted a larger sign that would take advantage of the visibility to I-29. So I-29, you end up with a lot of traffic. It's going 80 miles an hour, or some people 90, and along I-29. And the sign people have told us when we've gone through past sign regulations that, you know, speed, distance from the right-of-way, there's a science to what these sign letters are. And Nick Cox is in the audience, and he kind of explained that. I think it was Nick that had explained that to me a while ago, and it makes a lot of sense in terms of, you know, being able to see this visibility. And, you know, normally our ground monument signs, they're 8 foot high, 18 foot wide. That's not going to be seen from the interstate. I understand why this site was so popular for Ironhide, is that, you know, that there's this visibility to I-29. So we do think it makes sense to take that 8 by 18 sign and actually set it up similar to what we allowed Butler to do, go 18 feet high, 8 foot wide. So with that, it's a sign appeal. We're recommending approval. I talked with Steve a little bit before this, we could do this on other I-29s if you guys think it makes sense, or maybe we don't have that many and we make them come through under a sign appeal piece, but with that, I'm assuming that this makes sense to others, and I'm happy to have a discussion with that, or the applicants are here in the audience as well.
Ms. Stryker.
Thanks. Right across the interstate is the furniture, and they don't have a ground monument sign. They have an upright sign, right?
Yeah, that sign similarly got approval as well. It's actually the artist piece, right? It's the chair needed approval.
Two chairs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that one.
That one, and this.
Before Furniture Row agreed to come, they needed that approval.
Okay.
Because that was their, and I think everything else they use is wall signs there. Their building's a little bit different, that their wider side of their piece is facing the interstate, so I think they utilize a lot of wall signage there too.
Well, and what do they have for wall signage on that Butler, or on the Bobcat building?
On the Ironhide. Is there anything right now for wall signage?
Just a set of Bobcat channel letters
Okay.
and an Ironhide sign, please.
Yeah, one Ironhide sign, backlit sign on the main building, and if you come from the south, there's a Bobcat backlit sign.
Would you rather have bigger letters on your building or a bigger sign out front?
Jason, we should probably have it come up and say who you are for the record as well.
Yeah, I'm going to open the public hearing. Please step up and address item 3.6 at this time.
Well, I'm Jason Voschak, owner of Ironhide Equipment. But yeah, I would rather have the sign that we're proposing than more on the building. So that was part of the initial design and that sort of thing, so. And it's not, we got Flying J, which is a 100-foot sign over there across the street. Target Marketplace has a really large sign. I think that this would be eye-appealing. We have a lot of frontage, about 500 feet of frontage. So I would rather, to answer your question, I'd rather have it on the sign that we're proposing.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
And there's two signs going in? Is that?
No, just a
Proposed location?
one sign, right? One sign.
Yeah, one sign.
Dual-sided, one sign.
You're looking at the end piece there, so this singular piece is what would be facing the right-of-way, I think.
On the second page, I have two yellow highlighted spots that say lack of sign location.
One of those two spots.
One is, you're just gonna pick one of those two spots?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Bud, sorry. Okay, you guys are talking down there. All right. I like it. Okay, any other questions for Mr. Voschak before we set him down? Nothing? Anyone else want to come up and address item 3.6? Seeing no one, brings it back to the commission, close the public hearing.
Move approval.
Second.
That was very nice. Miss Sandy and Mr. Johnson, any further discussion?
Can I just make a quick comment too?
Please.
You had mentioned whether we should just allow these here or if they should come. I still like them to come.
Okay.
Just because I don't think there will be that many and,
I would agree.
yeah, okay.
Don't get something crazy.
Okay.
I'd agree.
Sounds good.
Okay. No discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, item 3.6 carries. 3.7.
3-7, off-premises billboard sign for South Washington Street located at 1218 South Washington Street.
Mr. Brooks?
Just going to zoom in on the site, but I'll talk a little bit about what's in code. So currently we have a cap of how many off-premise billboard signs are allowed. I'll kind of use off-premise and billboard same. And what happens way back when, the city of Grand Forks put a cap in on how many are allowed. And the companies are allowed to take one down, put one up in certain areas. And on South Washington specifically, there's a cap of 9 that are allowed. So overall, the city has a cap. On South Washington, we have a cap. And I think right now we either have 6 or 7 on South Washington, so we have one that's available. Newman Signs also has one that they had just recently taken down, and they're looking to put up another one then in this location, which is 13th and Washington. So one of the requirements, if you're going to put one up on South Washington, is to come before planning commission get approval to do that. It was an important corridor, a lot of activity there, and the thought is it shouldn't be necessarily easy to get that, and then they put in certain criteria. So in this case, there was a criteria of, is it going to create a visual clutter? Would it reduce sight lines at roadway entrances on the property where the off-premise advertising sign will be located and on abutting properties? And was there a concentration of off-premise advertising sign? So staff kind of looked at those, and in this case, this location is basically a one-block location. It's a mini mall area, if you will. And there's one ground monument sign on that site, and this sign's going to, obviously stick up higher than that. It's not going to be, I don't think it's going to block anybody's view. In terms of concentration, in this case, I think the only concentration really that we have along this area is really up at Washington and Demers. There's a cluster there of signs, and they're not proposing to go in that location. 13th, in terms of this whole corridor, they're spaced fairly well, so I think that takes care of some of the other criteria. So in terms of what's allowed by code, we actually think that this fits, and we did notify 200 feet around this property. I didn't receive any feedback, but of course, people always have the ability, I don't know if anybody's here, but this one is public hearing piece for that. So with that, we'll answer any questions that you may have in terms of code, what's required in the evaluation that we did.
So just a quick one from me, so the next closest sign is what, 3,800 feet down? Where is that one? Or what is that one? So just visually, I remember. Trying to think of what that, to the south there?
Oh, to the south. I think the next one, let me turn on our, so we actually have these, since they're codified, we've worked with our IT department and actually put up these pieces. So that one is down in front of, across from Library Circle, was where that one's at. Bowling alley, yep, thank you.
Oh, okay. Then the next cluster would be Demers, and then down to the pawn shop, I think, like you guys.
Yeah, then they kind of get spaced down here. This one's Happy Joe's, I believe, and this is probably Domino's, I think, has one on, so.
Did you say that they took a sign down?
Yeah, there's a sign that was taken down in another area.
Where was that? Do you know?
Let me see if I didn't include their application, the full application in here, but do you remember where that one was?
It was on Gateway Drive.
On Gateway Drive.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay, near the Ralph.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so when you say creating clutter and concentration, I mean, in that area, there's a lot of signs and a lot going on. I mean, you've got McDonald's, you got 3 or 4 fast food restaurants, a bar right across the street, and then on this side, right? So, I mean, when we're thinking about clutter and concentration, we're not just thinking about other billboards, right?
Yeah, so when we came through, and the last time we did this evaluation, I don't know who, if anyone, Frank, maybe was on the commission, we had this discussion with Happy Joe's, and we took a shot right down from a street level piece, and now we have these lovely tools where we can actually do a shot of, looking down the corridor. IDs will be down, that sign will be up here, you have a little bit of a concentration, as you go down. Everybody is allowed pylon signs along this. They'll be a little bit lower, but yeah, each one of those properties has them, but as you kind of look back at, this particular location, that block, I kind of looked at that block, and I think I'll stay on the
Where's it
corridor
going to
here.
go on the property?
I can show you that here in a second. Here's the one that they have for this whole site. here, and it's going to go in one of those islands there, so I'll go back to the individual site and where they were looking. It'll go into an island right here, is the pole location that they looked at last. Potential that could move, but for right now, that was, they were going to utilize the island there. What's that?
They're going to take away some of their parking too.
Actually, no, I think that base, I don't know if they were necessarily looking at taking out any parking. And then they won't be able to overhang any of the right-of-way as well. Right-of-way is a little odd in here, is that they actually state bumped out and has some piece there. They won't be able to overhang the right-of-way with the billboard, so I don't know if that'll move that to a location here, maybe. But
Mr. Matichak, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, this is going to be a straight face billboard, not digital.
I think it will be digital, I believe.
It'll be digital.
Yeah, digital.
Yeah.
One-sided or two-sided, or?
Yeah,
Two-sided, okay.
Two-sided.
two-sided but not digital.
Digital.
It will be digital, okay.
My guess is most new billboards you're going to get, I mean, obviously, there's an expense to doing that, but
I didn't see anything in 3.7 here that said what it was
Yeah.
going to be, so, okay.
yeah, just about all of them that you see now are going to more than likely have that digital. That's kind of the wave of the future, and those, just so you know, I know Newman knows, but there's a hold time on those. So a normal ground monument, there's supposed to be a hold of, I can't remember, a second or two, maybe a second, but billboards, I think, are required 7-second hold on those, and there can't be anything moving on those in terms of graphics or anything like that. So we do have that codified.
Well, any other questions before I open the public hearing? I'll do that now. So anybody in the audience would like to step up and address 3.7, please do so at this time. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to commission.
Move approval.
Moved by Ms. Sandy. Second by Mr. Kuhn. Discussion? Mr. Reichert?
Yeah, just because we have the ability and have these open doesn't mean that we have to put one, especially in a place like this where there are signs everywhere down there. I mean, on the other side of the street, right before it, right after it. It's a very busy section of town. If we want to talk about something that creates clutter and a concentration, this is definitely going to do that. I mean, we've already got a ground monument sign. This is going to be incredibly more cluttered and distracting. I just think this is not the right place for one. And I think we've got to be really careful that we don't junk up Washington any more than it already is. So I'm going to vote against this. I think it's the wrong place for one. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Reichert. Any other discussions? Seeing no hands, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Oh, boy. I'm going to do a little hand vote here. A roll call vote.
Bucky?
Nay.
Johnson?
Nay.
Kuhn? Was that?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Lunsky?
Yes.
Matichak?
Nay.
Reichert?
Nay.
Megan?
Yes.
Wastick?
You don't have to vote.
Nays got it. 4-3. Just did. Okay. Motion fails.
Did you say 4 to 3?
This will be a recommendation still on to council, so
Do you want me
Why did you vote?
to read through?
Yeah, it's 1, 2, 3, 4.
was it 4 to 4?
1, 2, 3.
Yep.
4-3.
Budke, Johnson, Reichert, and Matichak
Four.
voted nay.
But
You-
but you're not
Lunsky
voting?
and Sandy, aye.
Even if you would vote, it'd be.
Steve does, you do vote on this, Steve.
Vote.
It'd be a time I'm done. I voted.
Yeah,
Well, but I think you still, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you
I
have to
voted
have the
nay.
record vote.
Then I'll.
okay, that was 5-3 then?
5-3. Yeah, 4-4, it still fails, so it's irrelevant.
It still goes forward to city council, that'll be your guys' recommendation, so,
Yep.
just so you know.
Yep,
Did
no, absolutely,
Steve,
it'll go to city council.
Mr. Waskick, did you vote?
Yeah, I voted no.
Okay.
Then it's 5-3. Like you said, then it's not a tie. Mr. Ratchek, please.
Do we still have the sign committee?
It's been a long time.
I don't want to open this can of worms again, but
A sign sub
35
exists.
years ago, we started with a sign committee, and we've been working on signs ever since, and I'm the only one that remembers all that, because I've seen every sign go through this place, and it seems like we can never get our stuff together outside of the fact that Columbia Road is supposed to be ground monument, and anything goes on Washington almost. So, but I thought we had a sign committee. We got a thing coming up on murals, so I won't jump ahead here, but we've been over that before too. And I'm just, you know, if we had a strong sign committee, I'd like to see a sign committee with city council people and planning and zoning people and engineering people to look at this and make a good recommendation to us to do something with it.
I agree.
You know, so that's just a point I want to make, and I'll leave it at that.
Can I also?
I didn't really think this was that bad of a deal, but I still just opposed where it was. So,
Yeah. Miss Sandy?
I just wonder if there needs to be clarification then, because I was on the sign committee, and I know that it's a battle to get between companies to get those signs. So now I'm curious, can Newman put a sign up where they had one before? Or is it still their spot?
Yeah, they have time to put up another one. So this still goes to city council. We'll see what happens, but they still have the ability, they still have a sign that they would be able to put up. And I will let you know, and I didn't include this in the presentation, I probably should have, but there is something in code that says for every 566 more people that we have in the census, presuming that we go up, which I do intend that we will go up, we'll find out this fall, there's going to be an increase in the amount of billboards allowed. So for every 566, we'll increase our cap number. And folks are calling. They are aware that exists, so we do anticipate getting some applications.
I think it is going to be a challenge because, I mean, in a perfect world, there wouldn't be any signs, but we have billboards and they want to put them where there's density, and so they just, their nature is that they're visual clutter, and that's the purpose, really. I mean, they want to catch your eye. So we either have to allow these in the appropriate areas or not have them at all. Because I don't know that I feel comfortable telling someone that that's a bad spot, but 2 blocks down might be better, or if we don't have anything written down for us to make those judgment calls.
Yeah, and
Because what's a good spot? I mean, I'm actually curious, what would be a good spot? Because they're loaded on Gateway, they're loaded on Washington. I mean, that's where they go. So
Right.
you don't want to start putting them somewhere we don't have them, and in many places they're not allowed, and so maybe we need to make code changes, but
I like Mr. Matichek's thought too, is actually, you know, we've done a sign subcommittee, I believe I was on it, if I
Yeah,
remember
you were.
correctly. You know, that it gets so far and then kind of shuts down. So get something developed, we can push some of these items through.
Yeah, and my intent wasn't to go through the sign sub. I know we do have one, but my intent wasn't to run through on each of those. So we've talked about taking bigger issues like code changes through them, but that was my intent. That's why we didn't run this through a sign sub. Code doesn't require us to. So from that perspective, I also wanted to point out, City of Grand Forks is unusual with the cap. Most of the companies understand Grand Forks has a cap. I'm okay with the cap, but you know, there are probably those out there who would. There's some cities maybe that don't like billboards that would love to have a cap. There's probably some companies that would like us to get rid of the cap. So there's probably all over the place, and so. I think we do limit them, and in this case, I just looked at it from a staff level.
Well, we'll send it to
So
city
how much-
council and see what they got to say.
one more question.
Go ahead.
How much, you said they do still have some time to find a spot? for
Yeah,
the sign.
so
What is that?
typically what we do is a year.
Okay.
The applications
And
are.
how long has it been? 2 years you usually do?
2 years
Since you took down the one?
to
replace one that was taken down?
I think our city code, like, once you put in an application, the application lasts a year. That's what I was, so the building permit's for a year. I think the state allows a 2-year time frame. The city, I think we would give them this year to put up a new one, and find another location if this one is not allowed.
Okay. And of course, it goes to council and it probably will pass there, but that might be something else, because if we decide that every spot is not appropriate or too cluttered, then they're trying, and you
Yeah.
hate to have them lose their opportunity, because I know they're hard to get.
Yeah, their currency, you know, there's a little bit of peace for them, so, yep.
Okay, well, we'll move on. Good thoughts, good questions, good comments. Item 4, communications, preliminary approvals, 4-1.
4-1, directed ordinance to previously approved vacation of utility easements 4575 32nd Avenue.
Ms. Edwardson.
All right, so this is a corrective action item. Last fall, we ran through a vacation of a utility easement in Columbia Park. This is the Matt Construction property site. There was a issue in our process filing. We didn't get something stamped by our surveyors. We should have. We didn't find this out soon enough, and so now the legal has changed. So we've gotten everything straightened away, but our advice from our city attorney and city clerk was to run this back through for approvals just to make sure everything's kosher. So pretty standard, nothing has changed. It was a processing error on our end. We're looking for approval.
Mr. Riker.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Wow. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Could I please get the second motion?
Mr. Riker, Mr. Lunsky.
Thank you.
No? Mr. Matichek, sorry. I knew it came that way.
Reichert and Matichek.
Yes. Thank you. 4-2.
4-2, ordinance to amend Chapter 8 Land Development Code signs as related to murals.
Good evening. Andy Conlon with the City Community Development Department, back with murals again. A little bit of context, and then I'll run through some of the proposed changes we're discussing tonight. Back in 2018, we made changes to the city code to allow murals to be painted on buildings under certain conditions. Certainly tried to anticipate needs and things like that back then, but as might have been expected, certain uncertainties or areas lacking clarity emerged once we had some real projects come through. So the goal tonight is basically just to outline a few of the proposed changes that we're aiming to address some of those uncertainties and set hopefully clearer expectations for folks going forward. So I'll just quickly run through some of the changes that we're proposing and then certainly be happy to answer any questions. 3 main things that we're trying to address tonight. First being clarifying conditions for when murals can be installed or painted directly onto historic buildings. You might recall last year you approved a mural on the south wall of the Rhombus Guys Brewery. That was approved at that time on the premise that the protective coating that was applied prior to the paint would preserve the brick and could be removed without damage, which is sort of the original intention of the mural code, but just wasn't spelled out very clearly. So at that time, this body had asked staff to make changes to the code clarifying that and setting those expectations more clearly in writing, which is what the proposed amendments seek to do. I have been asked to mention just that the historic preservation folks would rather prohibit all painted murals on any unpainted historic buildings. However, I'd also just mention, obviously, that we hear from folks on the opposite side of that spectrum who would, certainly like to see murals and stuff. So the goal with this is from a staff perspective, is to try and strike that balance between, allowing murals but applying, the restrictions we want to see to preserve our historic assets. So that's the first proposed change. The second is to specify restrictions on size and location of artist and sponsorship credits. This is just another area staff was reviewing the code that we found was lacking in some clarity. We certainly want artists and sponsors to be able to claim credit for the work that they've done, but at the same time, we want to make sure that the mural is the focus and it doesn't end up being a billboard for a given artist or something like that. So as proposed, the credits on the mural would be limited to either 1% of the mural's surface area or 4 square feet, whichever of that is less. and would have to be located in one of the corners of the mural, just to, again, make sure that the mural remains the focus. So that'd be the second change. The third being restoration of historically significant signage. I'll refer to them as ghost signs through this section, but we've received sort of, off and on interest over the years of, questions of people who may have interest in restoring ghost signs. So most recently we have Chad Kaya of Kaya Painting and Blue Weber from the Downtown Design Association that have brought forward a concept anyway to restore two historic Coca-Cola signs. One is on the rear of Rhombus Guys Brewery and the other is on the, I guess it'd be the east side of the Urban Stampede building. So they're interested in at least pursuing that concept, but currently code doesn't allow that. Historic Preservation does maintain or has created a list of historically significant signs or ghost signs that we, as written, would propose to use to identify which signs would qualify or be treated as ghost signs under this code, these code changes. The premise of that list is essentially that the ghost signs are now recognized far more for their historical significance and cultural significance than their, long past commercial value. So the language basically spelling that out is what's proposed. Additionally, because that's the case, because they are recognized as historic assets, we're proposing language to include an opportunity for the Historic Preservation Commission to provide feedback and comments to applicants, in things like materials, location, style, content, that sort of thing, just to, again, ensure that historic element is preserved. So outside of that, all other mural code regulations would apply to ghost signs as written here. So, and then I'll just a real quick, really minor, I think, fourth change is just to reflect the more administrative staff reality that community development staff are typically working with applicants throughout the process, and we're just putting that into code, replacing the inspections department with community development. That said, the zoning administrator and inspections would still have the final sign-off to ensure it's compliant with all this stuff. So with that, that's a fairly long summary of the changes we're looking to make. I'm happy to stand for any questions. I know Mr. Kaya is in the audience and would be happy to answer any questions pertaining, like materials and that sort of thing, as well as their proposed concept. If you have any questions, then I'll just give a quick shout out to Dawson, again, our intern, who's done a fairly extensive amount of research about other cities' mural codes, federal code, that sort of thing. So just kudos to him, and with that, happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Mr. Matichek, I was looking at him. Mr. Matichek, start us off.
Well, coming in here tonight, I just drove by at least 100 murals from my farm to the state mill. They got 2 full trains in there today. And some of it's graffiti, but some of it's pretty good. Unbelievable. But I just wanted to get back to a question. The zoning administrator would then have full control of the content?
No, we are, so we're not able to control what content can be included in a mural. The zoning administrator's review would basically fall to the extent of what's included in code to just make sure that it's compliant with the criteria we have laid out here. That said, there would be a distinction between whether or not this would fall under the mural code versus the remainder of our commercial sign code. That would be part of it, but in terms of the content of the mural itself, we're not able to control that component.
Okay, another thing, going back to the rhombus, the side of the old opera building where Rhombus Guys are, there's not really a message there, is it? They just had painted bricks? I mean, I think it looks really good.
Yep.
So is that really considered a mural, or is it just cleaning up a building and painting it up nice on the side?
That's sort of, I mean, there's a lot of gray areas that we're sort of finding as we go through mural code. That's sort of another one of those, I think, because as defined, a mural is sort of a means of artistic expression, that sort of thing, which is the, I think the lens and the approach that was taken in bringing that forward is they wanted a way to express art on the outside of their building, which is, I think, where it falls under mural code. That said, sometimes it's difficult to define that to a certain degree. But I think that's what sort of drove that one anyway, is it was a means of expressing art in that case and fell under this, so.
Mr. Budke?
Thanks, Andy. I think this is really a great draft here. So kind of speaking to some of what you mentioned here, the like clarifying conditions, I think this does a really great job of that, basically building off of the experience from the Opera House. And in that case, I would definitely say that is certainly artistic expression. It looks wonderful. It's certainly not just painting the side of a building, which is the case with some of the other brick facades in the neighborhood, but I saw them out there for weeks. They very carefully had it all mapped out, and it turned out wonderfully. The sponsors also, I think that's a good addition. There was an earlier version at one point where I saw the sponsor actually like moved, and I'm not sure all the mechanics behind that, but I think that was the correct decision. When I first saw it, I kind of raised my eyebrow. I didn't care for it, but I think the final version is great, and that's consistent with what's in here. I also really like that this opens up the door to the ghost signs, which has always been basically not possible before. I think this opens up a whole new realm of possibilities. Other communities that have restored ghost signs, they're assets to the neighborhood and to the property. I see no reason why that would be different here. And then as far as the administrative, just one thing on the language, Andy. So looking at the text specifically, paragraph 5 and then 5A, there's an edit to X's out the city inspection and changes that to community development.
Correct.
But in the parent paragraph, right, paragraph 5, there it still says inspection department.
Correct. So
is that intentional?
Yep, it is. So the subparagraph or section A beneath that, it refers to the mural proposal, the application materials and stuff being submitted to, we're swapping in the community development department, so they'll submit the materials and we'll work through the process with community development staff, which is sort of just how it's been functioning informally. So it's just to codify that piece. However, the section 5 in that section's text, what do we call it? The letter of notice to proceed does come from the inspection department after being signed by the zoning administrator. So it is intended to be separate. So community development staff will receive the proposals, work internally with inspections department and the zoning administrator to work through the application materials, and then the notice to proceed, should a mural receive it, will come from the inspections department.
Okay. And then one other question, the following paragraph there, so 5B, and you spoke briefly about like this balance, right, between the two different philosophies on historic structures. And it says here, may. Review of proposals to restore historically significant signs may include presenting to the Preservation Committee. So, I don't know, may seems like a weird, squishy word for ordinance.
Yep, that makes sense. So it was included in may as sort of, again, trying to anticipate, I think, I mentioned at the beginning of this, is, we try to anticipate all the different scenarios that, would come forward and create a code that would be sort of adaptable to those.
Okay.
It wasn't that way originally. So this is just sort of trying to, almost like a lesson learned, is trying, from my perspective anyway, is to try and build in as much flexibility as possible so that each mural can sort of be handled on a case-by-case basis. I think some certainly should go to historic preservation for those sorts of things. It's just really to try and build in some flexibility, is to be able to handle each on a case-by-case basis, to bring it to the appropriate parties as necessary. We sort of informally operate in a similar way to Downtown's Design Review Board, in that when murals that fall within those boundaries or that are appropriate for them to be made aware of, we bring them forward as a heads up, this is going on. Any comments, feedback, that sort of thing can be relayed then to the applicant. So it's just trying to mirror that a little bit.
Okay. So then if it is sent to the Preservation Committee or Commission, and they say no, like what would happen then?
I think, again, sort of preserving flexibility in that regard, and that the hope would be that it would give us an opportunity to work with the applicant to sort of maybe adapt their proposal to meet historic preservation sort of recommendations or comments or whatever you want to call it. So that would be the thought. If there's a strong disconnect between, historic preservation says, you know what, this is just their, it's a Coca-Cola sign and they're painting a Pepsi one. That's not meeting the spirit of restoration and stuff like that. Staff then can, basically factor that into our review and say, you know what, this isn't really compliant with code. It's not a restoration, it's a new thing. So, I guess, yeah, does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, I guess, like, just,
It'd sort of be a
like-
staff, it would inform a part of staff's review, if there was, if the reason for rejecting it would be, I just don't like it there, or I think the mural looks fine as it is, or the ghost sign looks fine as it is. I think that's one piece of feedback. If it's something along the lines of this isn't historically accurate, this isn't a restoration, that's another thing. So, trying to codify
Yeah.
that piece is difficult, but that's what we're kind of shooting for.
okay, thank you. I'll move approval.
Obviously. I think you two girls could talk all night on this. But anyway, just be careful, we just voted down something for clutter and distraction and driving and all that, so. I did have a conversation with Mr. Brooks prior, and I don't know if, when you go for final, you were gonna look into it more, Ryan, of having it, the same thing you said, Mr. Butke, instead of May, probably needs to go in front of the Historical Society on a historical building. I just probably think that would be smart, that we discussed. That was my comment. I wish there was a sign committee for these things. Everybody knows how I look at these. Any other, Mr. Riker? There is a motion, there is an approval, there is a motion on it.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Discussion.
It says that the 4x4 piece or whatever has to be in the corner.
Right.
Isn't the one that they just did on the Rhombus building not in the corner? And wasn't that
It is on the corner now.
Oh, it is?
That's sort of what drove this, is that there was some lack of clarity there as to where that could go. So to your point, when it was raised up higher, I think there was some raised eyebrows as to like, well, I don't know if that's quite what we had intended for credits. So Mr. Kai is great to work with and agreed to actually reduce the size, which fits under the requirements included in the proposed amendments, and moved it to the bottom corner now. So it is in the bottom corner.
Is there a reason that we need that there? I mean, something that strict? I mean, with a mural, like, I don't know. I mean, the possibilities of what they could look like would be immeasurable. Do we want to put in code that we limit something like that?
We thought it should have a limit. I mean, that was one of the reasons.
Well, I think as to size, certainly, but I'm talking about location.
Location, that's, the location component was really to just address, like we said, the example that came through with the Rhombus guys one, when it was raised up, I think there was more questions as to whether or not that looked more billboard-ish, and that's not what we were going for with the credits component. So the location component was really just to address in that scenario, maybe isolating it to a corner sort of, reinforces that it's artist credits component. That said, you're absolutely right. It's art, so it can be incorporated in a million different ways. So trying to codify that again is tricky, but that's sort of what we were going for anyway.
I just don't like the advertisements on them. I've never had, I think the artist can sign off and you can make a silent donation or whatever you want to do, but I just don't like the advertising on them. I think it takes away from the art. That's my feeling, always has been. I think that's cheapening it out.
Make an amendment then.
I think it might be important for the artists to be paid to do the art, perhaps.
Well, that's, yeah, it's not really ours to decide what or who gets paid for what, I can't decide what they get paid. You know what I mean? If the building owner wants to pay him, or, you know what I mean?
It's kind of like a park
I don't
bench,
take it
though.
as my job to decide if they should get paid or how much they should get paid for that, or if at all.
No, I
That's
understand
their-
that, but I think a lot of times, that's they're supporting that, and so they want the recognition. It would be similar to naming rights on the Alaris building or whatever.
We pay a lot of money to the school systems, and you don't see Bergstrom Electric on the back of their jerseys. Right? We get our pat on the backs in other ways. Just my thought,
I think the sponsorship component does actually propel this, and maybe we'll bring more of these. If we handcuff it too much, we might be limiting ourselves.
As I mentioned, wouldn't put Chad on the spot to, to vouch for that, but that's sort of my understanding as well, is that, it's funding for these is always sort of the key constraint, and I think you're absolutely right, is it's a key component of propelling them further, making them more accessible to more artists, so.
Yeah, I do like the sign being in the corner, just so that anyone who's maybe walking downtown appreciating the murals, it's always, you kind of know where to look to see who the artist is and where the support came from.
And that's why it's a preliminary approval. You don't get our ideas out there and let everybody know. I mean, like you said, you can do a lot of flyers on who sponsored it and who paid for it and get your advertisement off that way too. There's a million ways to do an advertisement. We got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Good comments from everybody. If not, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 4-7, preliminary approved.
Thank you.
Or 4-2, sorry. Reports from Planning Department, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. We are in the middle of a land use plan update too. I want to thank those who have participated. I think our next one is May 4th we're looking at. I also want to put a bug in everybody's ear. May 11th is going to be preliminary what we're looking at right now for a public meeting on that, so just to make sure everybody's aware. And before Chad Kaya leaves too, I would just want to say thank you. He did move that sponsorship piece, even though it wasn't a requirement at the time, and we kind of took a look at that, and he did move that before the quote actually got done, so.
Oh, it looks better.
Thank you all again for letting me do the mural. We met about a year ago last year, and you guys approved it. Thank you very much.
One other item, University Avenue corridor study was presented to City Council on Monday night. One of the items that came through there was a request for some zoning changes as well. So you'll be seeing that in the future as well, just more of an update of what's to come. So we have a lot of other stuff coming. It's going to be a busy year, just so you guys know. So our May meeting's it's already filling up, even though we're having our April meeting now. So just so you guys are aware.
What are the changes?
They're looking at what's called centerline zoning changes along University Avenue. So basically third heading west, looking to encompass more of the north side of University into B4 zoning. So I'll just generically call it that, so.
I think we should clarify, the city council didn't actually ask for you to make any zoning changes. We asked that you would take a look at it, and you make the determination and the suggestion if you believe the changes should be made.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the clarification, President Sandy.
Yeah.
For the record.
I know.
Address. So, Mr. Butke, did you have something to add?
We talked, I think, last year about form-based code and sort of the same area. I think that recommendation probably makes more sense in the context of a form-based code. So I guess I'm just curious if there's any update on that.
No, not right now. We do have design guidelines that are coming forward. Those should be done preliminary next month as well. So we'll probably have more to talk about in terms of even as we talk through that B4 and trying to figure out how that works.
Yep.
So thank you for Dana's comments, because we are trying to figure out too how that centerline zoning could work, and maybe trying to bring in a small section at first, have a discussion, get your feedback. So I don't think City Council said absolutely endorsed, at least from all of them. So it's going to be there is going to be some discussion that we're going to have on that and how it'll work, and maybe how it should work for the rest of it as well. So that form-based should be a part of that as well, and that it's the mix of uses that we're looking at. So.
Yep.
And I think I do, since Mr. Sandy's here and he got up to the mic, I'm going to throw something at him too. I'll throw the olive branch out that I'm going to say Mr. Matichek's idea on putting a real sign subcommittee together of maybe a couple entities with engineering, planning, zoning, city council, because we're just going to get hit with this every every month.
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't trying to interrupt, but I just wanted to make sure, because we did actually have a conversation about it, and Mr. Weber made the motion that we ask you to change, and we had some discussion that now we want to make sure that...
Oh, no, we're good.
Yeah, but long before any of the rest of you were on the sign committee, I was on the sign committee in 2007 with Mr. Gangler, and probably Mr. Matichak and I might have been on that committee together as well. I agree. I think that, well, I believe that in the past, the reason we always stumble on it is because you come up with lots of good ideas and then you put it in the hands of the city attorney and then it comes to a screeching halt. Because they're looking out for the best interest of the city, which isn't necessarily what rational people today in this room would think makes sense. Under the law, it's very difficult, I believe. And so we do have a new city attorney. He is a very progressive person who works very hard, and I think he will want to do what's best. And so I think he will, assuming the mayor and the council and everyone are on board, I think he would try to craft language that we could actually have some concrete defined parameters to use as a body. And so I'm all for it. I'm happy to help serve on the council side, but I think Ms. Mock or Mr. Veen, who've been on more recently on planning and zoning, would be happy to fill in as well. So I think it's a great idea.
Well, it's just, then, you know, and I'm looking out for the business part of it too, the Indigos, the Newmans, they actually would have something a little more concrete to go off of and come in, and then they can work with their prospective client and come back and forth to the table there, and then to come all the way here and get shut down.
Well, I remember some meetings that they were there, and they were helping us.
They were
telling us what, and these, here's the deal, these lighted billboards are a whole new deal.
Yeah.
I mean, you start putting lighted it's gonna look like the Las Vegas Strip if we're not careful, and it's gonna look like...
And of course, I was on council 10 years ago when we were having the exact same conversation because of the 566. We had just gotten the new census, and we were putting in, you know, offering up new signs, and there was a battle between organizations that wanted ownership of those spots. So certainly, I think anything that we can do...
I was on P&Z back in 2008 and 9 too.
Yes, so if we can figure out how to give us all...
It would be a wonderful thing on both of our heads.
I agree wholeheartedly. And Mr. Brooks is the guy to lead that.
I agree.
I'm hearing it's your fault.
So nominated.
That hasn't been fixed yet.
Mr. Brooks, sounds like you got recommendation from two parties
Yeah.
to run with this.
Signs are always fun.
Yes,
We'll be looking for volunteers.
absolutely.
All right. Let
Any
us know.
other
We'll-
business?
That's it.
All right. Make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Motion, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.